Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Yeah, here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. And we broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Brad's engineering the broadcast today. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And the telephone listen line is 605-477-3249. It's up 24 hours a day. 605-477-3249. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Very well. And you?
I'm good, thank you.
You know, I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today, which is ancient farming methods, or what to do with a farm and no tractor. Now, who better to discuss that with than you? I can't think of anyone, because that's what you do.
That's right. That's what I do, and part of the reason that I do it, particular neighbours of ours do have tractors because they had tractors before they moved on to their farms. But I didn't have a tractor before I moved on to this place. And after I moved on, I realised that the ground was, for probably about over 45 weeks of the year, either concrete or bog, neither of which is conducive to using a tractor anyway.
Yeah.
And so because we live in a semi-arid area, in a eucalyptus forest, so because we live in a eucalyptus forest, ploughing is out, and, you know, you'll end up hitting roots every 5 seconds and then killing all the eucalyptus trees and they fall down and all that, so you can't do that. And so, like I say, it's either bog or concrete for most of the year anyway. And so what would be the point of that?
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about these eucalyptus trees. Do they have a lot of sap, and if they catch on fire, is it a really hot fire because of the sap?
They don't. Well, they have a sap, but what's really dangerous about them is that they have a volatile oil, eucalyptus oil. Literally, the leaves are so full of eucalyptus oil that if you hold them up to the light, you can actually see the drops of eucalyptus oil inside the leaves. Mm-hmm. And that's what the problem is, rather than the sap.
Okay, so the reason I was asking is I was reading a couple comments on posts about these wildfires. Well, they're being called wildfires. Some people think that they are arson. I happen to believe that they're either carelessness or arson. But in California, and of course in Spain and Portugal as well. And what some people are saying in their comments is, you know, if we weren't importing these eucalyptus trees, these fires wouldn't spread and wouldn't be so hot. You know, the ones that they're planting in California because they're not indigenous. Is that correct?
I would tend to agree.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something, this type of ecology that we live in is actually called fire ecology, okay? And the trees are actually, they need fire to set viable seed or for the seed to germinate. And around here, there hasn't been a fire in a very, very, very long time. And priority to keep down the fuel load underneath the trees. And I do that by keeping a horse, okay? And the horse eats the grass, and also we gather the branches that they drop. Now, if anyone's planning on planting a eucalyptus tree in their garden, they have to be aware that they do grow to be enormous. The ones here would have to be, on average, between 50 and 100 feet tall. They grow to be ancient, and they they drop branches as just a part of what they do. And what happens is they get to a certain size, okay, and they grow branches of a certain diameter, and then the branch dies, and then after so many years, the weight of the branch itself actually, of the dried off dead branch usually, although sometimes they're living branches, the tree drops, quite literally drops branches in a high wind, which is quite good for if you're keeping a property for woodlot purposes, because you never have to cut down trees, because on a certain size of lot there's always going to be branches lying around. But on the other hand, for fire management, it's not good, and you have to be aware that you can't go walking around the forest in a high wind, because even a wind of 50 or 60 miles an hour might be enough to knock the branches off. So it doesn't even have to be particularly, hurricane force winds or anything like that. Even 40 or 50 mile an hour winds could be strong enough to get the tree swaying enough for the branches to start falling. And it's after such windstorms that you always see the new branches lying around the property. And the other thing is, here that eucalyptus trees do, I think that they're a stupid tree to plant anywhere in the world except for Australia, because they alter the soil ecology. They send their volatile oil as a type of pheromone into the soil, and the roots of the tree, they sap up so much water from the soil that they actually make a semi-arid environment. They actually dry out the soil and they rob the soil of nutrition. And you see an area where the eucalyptus trees have been gotten rid of and another species being planted in their place. And within probably 10 years, the fertility of the soil has just increased hugely. Yeah, so if you're thinking of planting eucalyptus trees, just don't, because they're really bad on a bunch of different fronts. They're good.
There's there's a state park down, maybe 40 miles or so from our farm, and it's called Bennett Spring State Park. It's in Missouri. It's about 5 square miles, and it was established in 1933. The elevation's about 1,000 feet. And this park is open just about every day, and you can visit it, and you can fish and so forth. But the state sets fire to the woods every 6 to 10 years or so. And I thought that was appalling. But that's what they do, and they call it, management of the woods. And I was looking to buy a farm near that park, and I noticed that it looked like somebody set fire to this farm. Mm-hmm. The trees were burned at the bottom, and there wasn't much growth, much undergrowth, and there weren't very many saplings. I thought, this is really weird. It's like a moonscape, except it has some trees in it. And the seller was really not interested in telling me the truth about what happened.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to say, oh, yeah, state sets fire to this place every few years or so, and when they do, you got to leave because the smoke is just so intense that you can't stay here. He didn't say that, but I think that would have been the honest thing to say. But that's what the state does. They set it on fire, and the problem is they're not always so good about containing the fires, to their own property.
That's the thing. They're really good at starting, and they're not so good at putting them out sometimes.
Yeah, and it's hard to put them out. Yeah.
Here in Australia, they do that all the time because if you haven't got livestock and if you haven't got a population of humans actually going into the forest collecting the wood, it's about the only effective way of reducing the fuel load. And so what they do is during the wet time of the year, so you're looking at probably about from May through to August or September, what they'll do is they'll go through and they'll actually set forest fires. They'll notify everybody with big signs on the road and public service announcements and all of that where they're going to have the controlled burn so that people don't panic. Mm-hmm. And, because everybody around here is very, very fire conscious. And but that's what they do. And they call them around here controlled burns. And it's really the only way reducing the fuel load. And if it's done properly, if it's done at the right time of the year, it's not so much of a problem. But, they could achieve a similar result by just allowing the population to go into the state park and freely collect firewood. That would achieve a similar result.
That's what we do here on our farm.
They charge a tax on the population, and you actually have police patrolling the state park.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, and if you'd like to visit her Facebook page, you can go to usaprepares.com, and you can click on instructors, and you'll be able to link right to her Facebook page. Also, there's a link on page 1, USA Prepares. We've been talking about rural areas and fires. And Guineith, have you ever driven through a wildfire?
I've never driven through a wildfire, but many years ago, my husband and I were living on an island with our children in southeast Queensland called Russell Island. And at the time, there was a very large bushfire on North Stradbroke Island, which was only 100 metres away across a piece of water called Guineith Passage, okay, and which was a shipping lane, and there was mangrove trees bordering North Stradbroke Island, and there were mangrove trees bordering Russell Island, so that the mangrove trees won't burn because they've got a very, very high salt content. But the embers, we were downwind of this fire, and the embers were getting blown from North Stradbroke Island to where we were. And it was absolutely terrifying because what people say is that being so close to such a big fire, it's like that the noise is like a freight train, and I can absolutely verify that. And my husband and myself, our response was to instruct all of the children. He had 5 children, and I had Connor. These other 5 children were my stepchildren. I had my young son, and I think I was pregnant at the time with my other son. And we all went around stamping out the embers and, getting the children to stamp out the embers, even putting a little pair of shoes on the toddler and having him stamp out the embers too. And you know something? It's a day I will never, ever, ever forget, because, while most of us were busy stamping out embers, I said to my husband, darling, it might be a good time now to hook the powerboat up to the car and take it down to the jetty so that you can put it in the water quickly, and in case we all might to get out of here, because there was only one road into town, and if the fire had come through, that definitely would have been blocked, which would have trapped us. So, and the only other way off the island was through this kind of muddy, they called it the jetty, but it was actually just, it was through the mud and onto tidal flats. But you could actually, at a stretch, you could launch a powerboat there, and local fishermen used to do that. But that is absolutely true. But what you've got to recognise is that fire is a part of eucalyptus ecology. If you go planting eucalyptus trees, you're either going to have controlled burns, or you're going to have massive bushfires of the type that we saw here in Victoria a number of years ago, 2008 and 2009. They had wildfires that stretched 200 or 300 kilometres all the way from Melbourne, suburban Melbourne, up to Bendigo, and as far west as Inglewood, which is only about 40 kilometres from here. So the Black Saturday bushfires didn't quite reach here, but they reached to within 40 kilometres of here. And you still see the fire scars on the landscape from that set of bushfires to this day. And what I think happened with these bushfires in California, I think they were deliberately set, because there were 13 or 14 different fires. I think there were 13 different fires.
Hold that thought. We've got Truck Driver Jay coming on right after the break. We'll be right back.
They were all at the same time.
Live in Australia, Guineith Isaacs and Truck Driver Jay joining us. Welcome, Jay.
Good morning, Vincent. Okay,
good morning.
I was talking to the engineer about the call-in listening line. It's on some kind of loop. You were talking to Dr. Shealy. But anyways, the engineer said that you all were talking about the fires in California, and I just came out of California, Northern California to be exact. I went in to California, I think, Saturday, and you can smell, if you're east of Sacramento, you can smell the smoke. It is very strong. I've been told that the people around Santa Maria, they're walking around with surgical masks on their face because the smoke is so thick. They're breathing this stuff in, and one of the councilmen from Santa Maria, he said, if you're planning on coming to this town to visit, you are not welcome. If you do not have to be there, they don't want you there. They, unless you are a firefighter, or you're bringing in supplies, to help with the relief, they don't want you in there. There's too many people in there already.
Mm-hmm. Jay, let me ask you this. Have you ever driven through a wildfire? I mean, where there's fire on both sides of the road?
No. The Forestry Service, the DOT, they will shut down the highway before you get to it, so that you're not in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me share this with you and Guineith, and maybe you can make some comments. Back in the 1990s, I was traveling to Florida with our family. Our children were competing in Disney's wide world of sports in the National Karate Championships, and there were some wildfires in this part of Florida, just like you see in California.
Yeah.
And everything was fine. There's a little smoke here and there, and all of a sudden, we entered a wall of smoke, and we were on the interstate. And what happened was terrifying. We saw fires on the left, fires on the right, fires were jumping the interstate. The median was on fire. You could even see telephone poles or power poles on fire. And you could even see power poles that were burned and were being suspended just by the wires of the nearby power poles. Yeah, absolutely true. And here's what was terrifying. So you see this wall of smoke, and you're traveling at interstate speeds. The guys behind you are traveling at the same speed. And if you slow down, or you stop, or you try to find a place to pull, you're going to be rear-ended by many cars. It could be 100 and trucks. And you can't pull over, even if you want to, because the sides of the road are on fire. So if you do, the likelihood of the gasoline in your vehicle exploding is very high. So you can't go to the left because the median's on fire. You can't go to the right because the edge of the road's on fire. You can't go straight because you can't see where you're going. And if you stop, you're going to get killed. That's what I experienced. And
you just have to keep going.
Yeah. And you try to go a little slower, over time, a little slower, and hopefully everybody else does as well. And you really don't know where you're going. Literally, you're driving blind. And if you look at the internet of some of the pictures of the road, you'll see that the smoke is absolutely blinding, meaning you can't see the taillights of the vehicle in front of you. So you think, there's probably nobody there, but it's not true. They're just a few feet ahead of you.
Well, the route I took, I came in from Nevada on Interstate 80. It came over, down Donner Pass and came down towards Fresno, and then got on 99. Down to Sacramento, and then down on 99 towards Fresno. Around Sacramento is where a majority of the smoke is, but you don't really see it or smell it around Fresno, south of Sacramento. But the weather and the news says, there is this smoke in the area, and even up here in Nevada, there is a little bit of a haze from all the smoke. So it hasn't gone away completely, but you can still see the haze from the smoke.
Jay, I was looking at some of the trucks as I was traveling on the interstate over the last couple of months, and I remember seeing Citizens Band radio antennas, 27 megahertz. Okay, do you use one now?
Yes, I do. I keep mine on, and it is a tool. I really wish that more, we call them four-wheelers, people who drive cars, small trucks, had CB radios just to keep informed of what's going on, and to let others know what's going on. It's basically a communication tool for everybody else, so that you're given a heads up of what may be coming up. Hey, there's there's a obstacle in the middle of the road. Watch out for it.
Yeah. or police radar traps, right?
Right.
Yeah, and what about the? It appears to me that I see fewer antennas on trucks because the 27 megahertz antenna, 1/4 wavelength is about 102 inches long. So if you have a 1/4 wavelength antenna, you can recognize that very easily as being citizens band. And there are shorter ones, yes. They're base loaded, top loaded, center loaded, meaning coils in other positions of the antenna to effectively have them be electrically longer. But I don't see as many antennas that I would identify as citizens band on trucks. Are truck drivers using them less?
A lot of and I'm hoping I don't lose you because I'm coming through a dead. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're starting to break up. Tell us quickly. Are truck drivers using CB less than before?
Right. The schools. A lot of the schools are teaching. Still hear me?
Yeah, we're losing you.
Okay. Coming up over a pass. Hopefully I'll...
Jay, I think we lost you. I think we just lost Jay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, we've got George in New Hampshire. Welcome, George.
Hi. How are you, Vinny? And hello, Guineith. I didn't mean to interrupt there with the other gentleman there. I called just about the same time he did, but he got in first. But anyway, I just wanted to say I was born and raised in a small community outside of Boston that had the dubious distinction of having more fires per square mile than any other community in the United States, with the exception of one other community that was about 8 miles away. And that community held that record for many, many years. I think it went into decades. And there was a fire back in 73, 74, where a third of the city burnt down. And they had over 1,000 pieces of fire apparatus coming from as far away. Now, this was in Massachusetts, coming from New Jersey all the way up into Maine. And they said that it was like a firestorm conditions, and by a miracle, they believe it was arson because a lot of the real estate values had gone down, and it was found that, instead of taking the financial hit because the market was down, certain individuals were resorting to torching their own property for their... Hello?
We're here. We got you. Yeah, we're here.
No, that's fine.
No, some musical
that
thing
was
cut
just
in.
an alarm I have set.
But I'll just tell you this. Somebody might be able to tell me where a fire can start, but no one's going to tell me where it's going to stop. And when you think whatever money could be gained as opposed to the risk to lives of people in the community, firefighters and everything, I just would like to think that these arsonists might just have a certain spot in hell, maybe one of the hottest parts of hell, reserved for them when they just indiscriminately light fires just for profit or for laughs.
We have people who drive down the dirt roads here in Missouri, and they'll just flick their cigarette butts, out the window. It's like they think they have the right to do that. They don't. They don't have the right to litter, and they don't have the right to send lit devices out their vehicle windows. I hate it. And eventually, the farmers are going to be annoyed with this, and we'll probably do something about it. And you might even get a chance to read about it. But I'm sick of it. Cans, bottles, string, cigarettes, and my greatest pet peeve is those darn happy birthday balloons. I don't know what people are thinking. They give them to children, the children let them go, and isn't that, off it goes. And then it lands, and then some cow chokes on it. It's disgusting. We need to stop. We need to ban them. They're dangerous when they land. We've got Guineith Isaacs with us, and we've got George in New Hampshire. George, we were talking about fires, and we were talking about an area of New Hampshire that or an area of the East Coast that had a lot of fires. And we're talking about arson, and we're talking about, it used to be called kind of like induced lightning when when restaurants would go. Yeah, when restaurants
I'm laughing
would
at the expression. Yeah.
induced induced lightning. Yeah. If a restaurant started up and it wasn't working so well, and it just would catch fire and spontaneously combust almost. And at least that's what it would appear. But it was always, or many times, believed to be arson. Is that what you're talking about happened in your neck of the woods?
Well, yes, definitely, because they even had an individual who was like the vice mayor, and when the mayor decided to run for a lieutenant governorship, this man was about to step into the position of mayor. And what happened was that he had a shoe store down on the main street, and there'd been a number of fires, that would start in one business, and it would basically take out almost the city block. And this man was seen hours after his store's close, leaving his store, when within 5 minutes after he left, smoke was seen pouring out of his store, and he was arrested. And one day before he was supposed to become mayor, he was indicted for arson. And I guess they had enough evidence there that he didn't expect the police to be around the area, but they happened to see, he was seen leaving within minutes after the flames started and the smoke. So let's just say, like I said, this became somewhat commonplace in that particular community, and hence it had the number one, or at least the number two spot in the entire United States of having more fires per square mile. And it was also only 2 miles square in the entire city. It was the smallest city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I was working at the bank, and I got a call from our insurance agent. And he said, "Vinny, did you see the paper this morning?" And I said, "No, what's up, John?" And he said, "Well, I could have sworn it looked like your building, was on the front page." And I said, "No, I don't think so." So I went and I got the newspaper and I called him back. And there's a picture of a fireman, throwing stuff out the second-story window of this apartment building. Or actually, it was a single-family house that I bought. It was in a row house in the city. And I said, "I can't believe it's ours." And what happened was the tenant was a woman, and she was about 30 years old. She had a daughter, who was 15, who had a daughter. And then the tenant's mother was there, so we had the mother, the daughter, the daughters. There's like 4 generations ended up in this place, and we rented it to one person. Anyway, so the 30-year-old had a squabble with her boyfriend, so he took her checkbook and set it on fire, just lit it on fire, and it's paper and it burns. So he threw it in the trash in the kitchen, and there was some kitchen trash in there, and started smoldering, and he decided that wasn't really a good place for it, because I just put a new set of kitchen cabinets in, walls. I mean, I just redid the entire house. It was really nice. And so I even put a new back deck on this place. So he took the lit checkbook, and it was in a plastic trash can. He put it on the back deck, right next to the lawnmower and the gas can, and set the whole place on fire. Yep. So I got a chance to see what it's like. He was arrested. For arson. And but we made the front page of the newspaper, and I learned about it by seeing it after our insurance agent called. But it's happened. So Jay's back with us. Gentlemen, George, do you want to stay with us?
Please.
Okay. George's going to stay with us. Jay's going to be with us. Gwyneth's going to be with us. And we'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Truck driver Jay is joining us again. I guess he got into a clear area. And also George in New Hampshire is with us. Truck driver Jay, are you with us?
I think he's dropped out again.
we had him Adam, and this time we did it. Okay, so Georgia, New Hampshire, you're with us, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to share something. We were talking about these fires, and we were talking about, arson. And, George, I believe you mentioned something about a special place in hell for people like this, right?
Yeah.
Who start these fires?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was thinking about a series that I was watching, Vikings. Have you seen it? We have it on DVD here. Have you seen Vikings?
I saw the original Vikings movie from the late 50s there.
Okay.
But
this is a series. This is a series. Anyway, so they have this. I guess I'm getting back to an eye for an eye. Okay. And what do you do with people who start fires? Just you put them in prison for a year or so. I mean, what do you do with them? Well, the Vikings had this really neat thing. It's like a barbecue, and they had this one guy that wanted to get some information out of, and so what they did was they had this cage, and it was horizontal, and they put this guy in his cage, and it was like a rotisserie over some coals, and they asked him some questions, and the more he didn't want to talk, the closer he became to the coals, and eventually, he decided that he would talk, and I was thinking that maybe an eye for these arsonists, because in Portugal and Spain. There are about 500 wildfires right now. 64 people were killed in one of the wildfires in Portugal in June. It's pretty serious stuff. A lot of loss of farm animals, domestic animals, people, and then property. So, your thoughts, George?
Well, the Chinese had a novel method and a novel philosophy. They had a saying that let the punishment fit the crime. And I believe that in many instances in this so-called justice system we're in, like you say, you can put somebody away, but does it really do much good in terms of altering the behavior or teaching a lesson or even restoring anything to the victim in a concrete way? Do you mind if I ask a question, Vincent, of Guineith?
Sure.
Yeah. Guineith, yep. I know in the land down under there, I was told that like in a lot of areas that are now more almost like desert, maybe 1,000 more years ago they were very lush and green, and I was wondering how you're combating that, and if it sounds like your area, you're bucking the trend trying to sort of revitalize the soil, but I'm saying, how's the wildfires in Australia?
Well, it's the eucalyptus trees that cause this desertification, okay? The thing is that when the Aboriginal people came to this land many thousands of years ago, eucalyptus trees were always here. But they weren't anywhere near as common, okay? When the Aboriginal people came here thousands of years ago, what they would do is that they would set campfires and they would deliberately light fires to drive game in a particular direction, and also because they would burn a field, and this goes on into one area of our original topic of ancient farming methods. They would burn a field, and then during the wet time of the year, and a month later it would all be green shoots. And it would draw the kangaroos in, and then they would camp nearby and wait for the kangaroos. Okay? But what they didn't recognize that they were doing is that all of the trees that were fire vulnerable would die, and trees that were fire dependent, like mostly eucalyptuses, would be the ones that survived. Okay? So, and they would move on to the next area, and they wouldn't comprehend that what they'd just done was they'd wiped out all of the trees that were actually really beneficial to the landscape, okay, like more rainforest-type species, that the next time they came back there, which might be a year, 5 years, whenever, then there would be all these eucalyptus trees there, and none of the other trees that were fire sensitive were there because they'd all been killed by the fire. That's how Australia became the landscape that it is. And you're quite right. In practically the whole of inland Australia once was one vast, lush rainforest, except for the very centre of Australia, which was a gigantic inland sea. Okay? And you'll find that many parts of central Australia, called the Red Centre, are actually considerably below sea level. And if you ask the Aborigines, they'll verify that, oh yes, when we first got there, that was an inland sea. And then it dried out, and they have a legend about a great dingo dug out the Murray River and drained the inland sea. Now, probably what happened was that there was, in small letters, climate change, which was caused by the Aborigines burning off, but not through the CO2, through the changes in the ecology caused by what plants survived the bushfires and what plants it actually needed the bushfires to propagate, and what plants were killed by them. That's probably more likely what happened. And then, of course, in Central Australia, it dried out to such an extent that only the very hardiest kinds of eucalyptuses were able to survive. And across the southern half of Australia, there's a huge desert, and it's called Nullarbor. But Nullarbor is not an Aboriginal word, it's a Latin word. Null, arbor, which means land without trees, okay, or no trees here. And in fact, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometres on that plain where actually no trees grow at all. And although there are more trees on the Nullarbor today than what there once were, because humans are now there, and humans bring, they poop. Poop has to go somewhere. It goes into a septic system. They pump water, and gradually the areas around the roadhouses, just on account of the fact that they are pumping and using some water, collecting some water, and that they have septic systems, they are gradually becoming more fertile. And it's quite an interesting thing to watch, because the main tree that tends to grow there are two types of tree. One is called the peppercorn tree, and the other one is various species of mallee eucalyptus, which are not a tall tree. They might not be any taller than about 10 feet tall. They have a gigantic taproot, something like an enormous carrot, and which continually sends up branches. And, you can cut the branches, and within about 10 years, it will have grown an entire new top set of branches. Because this taproot, it goes down and it taps the groundwater, and that's how they are enabled to survive. And they germinate after the very, very, very occasional wet years that you get in the Australian outback, which might only occur a few times in a decade. And, so that's the thing about the Australian ecology. It's completely man-made. There's nothing artificial or natural at all about the Australian ecology, and it was made by human beings setting fires, both accidentally and on purpose. Yep.
George, any other thoughts?
Well, not unlike Brazil, or that central Amazon basin there, where they said over the decades you'd have farmers who would torch large sections of the rainforest and then they'd basically farm for a few years, wear out the soil with very poor management of the farming techniques that we're using. Then the cattle ranchers would hire gunmen to go in and roust them off their the land that they were on, driving them further into the jungle to just restart the process again of lighting fires, clearing out the dense undergrowth, and basically just perpetuating it to the point where massive areas of deforestation since the 70s anyway, and aided and abetted by the government, who wanted to rapidly industrialize the central base and become like a world superpower, and that has a lot to do with the quality of our atmosphere today being so depleted.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I would also tend to agree that if they don't do something about the Amazon rainforest pronto, that it's going to turn into a vast desert within a generation, and that the Amazon River is actually likely to dry up because it's the trees that create moisture. And actually droughts in the Amazon are becoming more common every single year, whereas when I was a child they were practically unknown.
We'll be right back. We're going to try something a little different right now. We've got truck driver Jay back with us. At the same time, we've got George in New Hampshire. At the same time, we've got Guineith Isaacs and me, Vin Finelli. Jay, you were trying to get with us. Tell us about some of your experiences with these fires.
Well, the topic I got cut off was, I'm stopped now. The CB, the Citizens Band Radio, schools, I was talking to a couple of students for Stevens Trucking. Not a lot of them have CBs because their instructors tell them, you don't want one of those, it's pointless, it's useless, there's nothing but garbage on there. I've talked to some absolutely awesome drivers, give really good information, just talking about trucking stuff. But it's a tool, and especially during the wintertime when there's a lot of snow and ice on the roads, you want to know if there's an accident up ahead so you can start slowing down so you don't get into that accident.
I was just doing a quick calculation. I got my first operator's license, if you will, when you were required to have a citizens band license. I got mine about 52 years ago, and so I had one, and I had a citizens band radio, and it was really educational. And that was, the days when people were polite that used it. There was no profanity. It was self-policing, and then it got to be really trashy. And as your instructor, truck driver instructors were mentioning, and I hope it's been cleaned up since then. But it was really, really trashy. But yeah, it's a great tool. You're absolutely right. And I still have a citizens band radio here at the farm. So yeah, thank you for that, George. Anything else you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, if I may,
sure.
I know you're aware of this. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. And I'm not sure if Gwyneth, the truck driver, or Jay knows. It's, you remember the secret weapon that the Japanese used against us from about the middle to the latter part of World War II, concerning launching airborne incendiary devices with balloons that were carried on an air current that goes directly from Japan straight over the United States, specifically in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast.
Yes.
And they said that there was a complete blackout in the newspapers and in the radios because they were afraid that if the Japanese knew that this was taking effect, they were going to even launch more, which would have taken so much manpower, energy, money, and time away from the war effort, just trying to contain these wildfires out in the Pacific Northwest, so that the Japanese did the program for about 6 months, and they said there was a church group one time where one of these things came down in a picnic area, and I guess one of the curious members of the group, probably a young child, walked over and picked it up, and inadvertently it was set off when it would break. It was designed so when it would come down, the various incendiary compounds inside of the ceramic orb would basically react once they were broken and mixed and immediately ignite. And they said supposedly that was the only casualties was that particular group. But they said that the Japanese gave up the program because having their spy network not detecting any reporting of these of the effectiveness of this thing, they decided to just give up the program altogether. But I believe that for years after World War II, a lot of them touched down and for one reason or not did not go off. And I believe that as time and the elements broke them down, I believe that they might have accounted for a lot of the fires that were set in the 40s and the 50s. And on that, I'll just get off and I'll let you discuss what you're doing. Okay, and I appreciate the program.
Very good point.
Talking to everybody.
Thank you, George. Thank you. We're back with Guineith Isaacs, and we're going to be talking about ancient farming techniques. We talked about wildfires, but Guineith, I just want to share one thing. You know, I get sidetracked sometimes during the break. I get sidetracked a lot. And this is a story on 11alive.com, 11alive.com. And it says, arrest warrant. Mother put children in oven, turned it on.
Oh, my God.
In Atlanta, yeah. An Atlanta mother accused of killing her 2 young sons, putting them in the oven and turning it on, according to an arrest warrant. Authorities say that Lamora Williams, Lamora, called police and said her children were dead.
Oh,
and they found the bodies of a 1-year-old son, Jakarter, J-A-Karter, Penn, and 2-year-old Keyanta Penn, that's K-E-Y-A-U-N-T-E Penn, and a third boy, 3-year-old Jameel, J-A-M-E-E-L Penn, Jr. was also found. He was unharmed. But so it looks like she put them in the oven, turned it on, killed 2 of them. Now, this is as sick as it gets. Absolutely as sick as it gets. And the reason I'm mentioning this is wildfires, that's sick. This is sick. We're sucker punching the elderly as they walk down the sidewalk, that's sick. I mean, we're doing a lot, seeing people at an event and taking a vehicle and driving into them, that's sick. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are doing some really, really disgusting things to each other. It's got to stop. And I don't think there's going to be much progress in getting these things to stop until we have an eye for an eye or let the punishment fit the crime.
Mm-hmm.
That was my comment.
My thoughts on that is that mother will have to live with that forever. That she's done that to her children, and you know, what was going through her head? You know,
maybe drugs. Maybe drugs were going through her head.
It probably is drugs. But you know, she's sobered up and realised that she's actually killed her 2 babies.
Yeah.
I couldn't begin to imagine. I'm not sympathising with her at all. I think what she did was absolutely disgusting. But, you know, I would say that in prison she should probably be put on suicide watch because she's going to have to live with herself, and probably most women would not be able to live with themselves knowing what they've done to their precious babies. It would have to be a really, really evil woman to not at all care that she's killed her children in such a horrific way.
Yeah. Ancient farming. Ancient farming,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the first 1.5 hours of this broadcast could have been how not to do it. That's, a lot of ancient cultures and tribes did do what in Australia is called fire stick farming. Okay, that makes short-term green growth, but it fundamentally changes the ecology towards species that actually encourage fire, and these species, they also tend to rob the soil of nutrients and moisture, and it's not just eucalyptus trees. In other parts of the world, it's various types of pine trees and cedar trees, okay, have a similar effect. If you look in a pine forest, nothing grows underneath them, and that also is a fire ecology tree, okay? And it's also a tree where, often you do get massive wildfires in a especially Pinus radiata system. But how you have to do it is this. You have a small set of tools, and you use those hand tools to manage your own property. And personally, I have a spade. In fact, I have a couple of spades, okay, in case anybody feels inclined to help me. And I have what's called a star picket whacker. I don't know if you know what that is. It's
well,
like
we don't call it that, but we call it a fence pounder, fence post pounder.
Yes. I'm sure it's the same thing. It's a tube with a lump of lead fused into one end and a couple of handles on each side.
Right. It weighs about
for pounding star posts.
It fits over. When we talk about star posts, I believe we call them in the United States T posts, because if you look at the end of them, they're shaped like a T. Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So we call them T posts. And what you do is you take this tube, this heavy piece of pipe. In our case, has two handles, as you've described, and it has it fits over a piece of pipe about 2 feet long. About 2 feet long. It fits over the end of the post that you want to pound in, and you slam it, and you hit it again and again and again, and eventually the post goes in the ground. And the idea, the reason it's a pipe with the end welded shut, is so that you can kind of guide where this T-post is going. You can control the angle, left, right, forward, backward. And it works really well. It's loud, so we always wear hearing protection when we do it. But it's loud, and it's heavy, and sometimes of the year you just can't do it. I mean, it's like pounding a piece of steel into concrete. Winter's the best time
to do that job, when it rains for us. Probably summer for you, because the ground's not frozen.
That's right.
The effect's probably the same.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about a trick that would work. Do you have 1 gallon milk jugs, kind of plastic milk jugs? Do you have them in Australia?
We do.
Okay. What I was thinking is, if I needed to pound in a post and it was like rock hard ground, what I probably would do is take a 1 gallon milk jug or something like that, and take a pinhole and poke a pinhole in the bottom of it, fill it with water, and put it right over the area that I wanted to pound the post in. And drop after drop after drop of water, very slowly, would come out of that milk jug. And after a day or two, I might be able to pound that post in. What do you think?
You could probably do that. That would probably be a good idea. What I do, if I really need to get a star post in, is I hack out a shallow hole. And it quite literally is hacking out a shallow hole. And I pour some water into it. And then I come back, maybe an hour later after the water is soaked in and I dig the soil out and repeat the process. But usually that has to, normally I'll wait until winter when it actually rains. But the thing is, there's also the star post extractor, okay, which is a rather interesting looking tool which works on a leverage mechanism and actually pulls the star post out, okay? And that and a pair of linesman pliers and the wire, okay, that forms your fences. Once you've got your fences, you form a certain number of paddocks. That enables you to rotate your livestock, okay? Now, you should probably have the paddocks of such a size, the fields of such a size, where your livestock is going to spend about a week on each field, okay? So the size of your field is going to vary depending on how much stock you anticipate putting on there. And if you have between 8 and 12 paddocks, then you should have feed for most of the winter. And then you don't need to do the hay thing, okay? You constantly, and it takes a lot of work to put these paddocks in, okay? And probably, ideally, you should have one paddock for each week of your hay season, okay? So when it gets towards the end of the year, and you know that your stock is going to, the grass is going to stop growing soon. Okay, then you begin to think about the rotation, and you're also rotating the paddocks through the year. This reduces the fire load, okay, especially in an arid-type climate. Now, you would have to adjust this to your own climate because, obviously, snow kills grass, okay? You're still going to have to do the hay thing if you're in an area that has deep drifts of snow every year. And then you'll just have to get out there and try and get your community together with a scythe. And this is what I was, this is where today we are lacking because, getting a hay crop in by hand is just really, really, really hard. And then you would have to think of another way to supplementary feed your animals over the winter. And it would be possible, I'm actually experimenting at the moment, there is a type of beet called kale chalmulia. That's the Mangelwurzel is the type of beet. It's a feed beet. They grow to be 5 and 10 kilos in size. So around about 15 to 20 pounds.
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about farming without tractors and without machinery that requires petrochemicals. And we're talking about rotational grazing. Guineith, just as a note, we use rotational grazing here on our farm, and we have a lot of paddocks. And what we've done is we've divided the land into smaller areas, and we use what we call step-in fence posts. And what they are is steel rods with a spot at the bottom where you could push it in with your foot. And they're all steel except for
the pigtail at the top, and you put your electric fence wire
curly
through.
Q. Yeah, and that's the way we do it. But you've got to have moisture in the soil to do that, right?
You do. I'll tell you what, just really quickly, because I know we have a very, very short time. In the days before tractors were widely available, especially in England, they used to grow fodder crops, okay? And two common ones were turnips, and remember, England, they have a lot of snow. Scotland, they have a lot of snow. They used to grow turnips, okay, and they used to also grow what I mentioned before accidentally was kale charmulia. Okay, that's a type of kale. It's also called the walking stick kale. It grows to be about 5 feet tall, and it will actually grow in freezing conditions. Okay, it'll also survive drought once it's established, but you've got to get it established in the summertime, preferably planted in the spring so it goes through the summer, and then in the autumn or in the fall, it begins to get to a really mature height of 4, 5, or 6 feet tall. And you have that in a fenced-off field, okay, where the cattle can't get to it. You go through and you pick the leaves each day and you feed them out to the cattle. Now, you might think, well, I'm going to need a big area of that, and you're absolutely right. This is how you do it. You go with your spade and you dig a small hole, maybe 6 inches deep, or you fork over a small area of soil to make a bare patch. You plant the seed there. You go 1 foot to the side, and you do the same thing, or maybe with the kale charmulia, about 18 inches to one side, and you do the same thing. And you do this all through the field. Yes, it's going to take a long time. Yes, it is labour-intensive. That's why most farmers use tractors, because tractors just take a whole lot of the work away. But maybe one day tractors won't be there, you know, especially if things keep going the way that they are. It's really good to know how to do things without a tractor if you need to, okay? And so if you could plant 100 charmulias in one day, you would be doing well. And then the next day, another 100. If you could do that over a period of a month, of, say, having 25 working days in the month, okay, then that's 2,500 charmulia plants planted over a period of 1 month. And yes, it's a lot of work, but so is bringing in hay. So is just about everything else on a farm. And the thing about the charmulia is it keeps growing through the snow, through the ice, through the frost, keeps making its leaves, and you go through, you pick the leaves, and you feed them out to the cattle each day.
Is there any way you can do it without picking the leaves?
What was that?
Can the cows get in there and just eat the leaves and not destroy the plants?
They'll destroy the plants.
Yeah, okay.
You would have to have them fenced off because they would actually demolish the whole plant. Yeah. Okay, but if you go through there each day with, a hand carter or a wagon or a wheelbarrow or something and just pick vast quantities of these and put them out to the cattle, then I'm intrigued. Feed your cattle.
I'm intrigued with what you're saying. The problem that I'm encountering is in the winter we feed 3,000 pounds of dried grass a day. And
that's going to be a lot. That's maybe I'll tell you what you could do quickly. Train a couple of your cows to harness and get them into a plough. Find out how to do that. Or get some of your steers and turn them into bullocks.
We'll see you on Thursday. You've got some information for Rick Miller. Yeah, we'll call you on Thursday.
Yep.